What's up, everyone? Tony from the Cold Case Project, back again. And today, what I want to run with you over is all content shared in these videos is readily available in any Google search. Now, with that said, I take this content, have it rewritten, and upon rewriting it, put it in these videos to spread the word on the thousands and thousands of cold cases of men and women throughout the United States that are just forgotten, and I give this platform to them so their cases and their stories can be told. Now, in addition to that, if you look down below in the description, you're going to see some brand new t-shirt and coffee cup designs I've actually gotten from couple of my subscribers who have over the years have been giving me some awesome fan art. So with that said, I'm offering a 20% discount code down below if you check that out, and splitting proceeds with them because they're awesome. Been watching me for quite some time, and I definitely think they deserve to be rewarded for some of the work they do on top of being full-time employees also. So, once again, if you have any recommendations or any suggestions, comment down below. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the video. Like, subscribe. I'm out. Peace.
On a cold Tuesday in late January 1977, 24-year-old Melanie Flynn left work at the Kentucky High School Athletic Association in Lexington. She turned her red 1975 Ford Elite on a limestone street. It was a routine day. She was supposed to stop by a 5:30 p.m. appointment with her psychiatrist before heading home to her parents' house. But Melanie never showed up for the appointment. She never returned home. She never contacted her family or friends again. She simply vanished. Nearly 50 years later, her disappearance remains one of the most chilling and suspicious missing persons cases in Kentucky's history. But what initially looked like a tragic case of a young woman gone missing would later spiral into a tangled web of corruption, narcotics, and police misconduct, perhaps even murder. Melanie Flynn was born into a well-known Lexington family. Her father, Bobby Flynn, was a respected figure in state politics, serving as a Kentucky state senator. Her younger brother, Doug Flynn, would go on to play professional baseball for the Cincinnati Reds, winning a World Series ring just 2 years after Melanie's disappearance. Their family was prominent, well-connected, and proud. Melanie had a bold, lively spirit. She was known to be energetic, outspoken, and a bit high-strung. She had a love for horses and a dream of becoming a jockey or a singer. She briefly pursued a singing career under the stage named Melanie O'Hara, even relocating to Cincinnati for a time, but eventually returned home to Lexington. She lived with her parents, held a stable job as a secretary, and was trying to find direction in her life following a divorce. Despite some emotional struggles, Melanie wasn't a troubled person. She had suffered a serious head injury in 1972 after falling from a horse. The trauma left her without a sense of smell or taste and required months of recovery. Some speculated the injury had lasting effects on her emotional health, though friends and family said she remained fully functional and mentally sharp. Melanie had her share of youthful missteps, including a minor marijuana possession incident, but by 1977, she was trying to move on from it. She maintained a wide social circle and was known to attend parties across Lexington, especially in the city's growing drug scene, a detail that would become crucial in the months and years after her disappearance. That Tuesday, Melanie worked a normal shift. At around 4 p.m., she received a phone call from her father, Bobby. He asked if she could bring home some materials from the office. She said yes, but added that she had a psychiatrist appointment at 5:30 and would bring the items afterward. Melanie left the building around 5 p.m. and drove away in her red Ford. She never made it to her doctor's appointment. She never came home. Her parents waited anxiously for her to walk in the door that evening. But as the night wore on, their concern grew. Bobby Flynn, assuming his daughter might have gone to stay with friends, didn't report her missing until 3 days later, a delay that would later be criticized. When the Lexington police opened a missing person investigation, they found no immediate signs of foul play. Melanie had about $12 in cash when she vanished, and her next paycheck was never picked up. Her clothes, makeup, and personal items were still neatly arranged in her bedroom. There were no signs that she'd planned to leave voluntarily. Then, 2 weeks later, came the first break in the case. On February 8th, 1977, a patrol officer stumbled upon Melanie's red Ford Elite abandoned in the parking lot of an apartment complex on Hollow Creek Road. The location raised eyebrows. It was a known drug hotspot. Melanie had previously lived in one of the nearby apartments, but she hadn't been known to visit the area recently. Inside the car was a suitcase from a recent trip to Louisville and her red leather coat, but her purse and keys were gone. The suitcase had been packed, not dumped out or rifled through. The vehicle was locked and appeared to be in good condition, with no signs of a struggle. To investigators and her family, the car's discovery only deepened the mystery. Why would Melanie have driven to that particular area? And if she had been abducted, why wasn't there evidence of violence? 6 months later, in August 1977, another discovery provided a chilling new lead. Melanie's missing purse was found floating in the Kentucky River near Camp Nelson, about 20 miles south of Lexington. Inside the purse were familiar items: lipstick, a small perfume bottle, and 2 bottles of medicine, one of which was an antihistamine Melanie regularly took. There was no money or identification. The river location was remote and unsettling. How had the purse ended up there? Had Melanie's body been dumped in the river as well? A search of the surrounding area turned up nothing. It wasn't long before whispers about Melanie's personal life began to circulate, particularly her possible involvement as a police informant. Lexington Narcotics Officer Bill Kanan eventually admitted that Melanie had assisted him in an undercover capacity in 1975. She had been caught with a small amount of marijuana, and in exchange for avoiding charges, she agreed to introduce Kanan to members of the local drug scene. Melanie would bring him to parties and pretend he was her boyfriend, allegedly helping him infiltrate drug circles. Kanan claimed the arrangement was strictly professional, but Melanie's parents disagreed. They believed their daughter had developed a romantic relationship with Kanan and that he was abusing his authority. They also accused Kanan of downplaying or even concealing key details about Melanie's final days. Significantly, Bobby Flynn reported his daughter missing directly to Kanan. The implications were sinister. If Melanie had knowledge of police involvement in local drug trafficking or had begun to ask too many questions, could someone in law enforcement have silenced her? Despite mounting suspicions, the official investigation took an odd turn in June 1977 when lead detective John Bizak abruptly closed the case, citing credible sightings of Melanie in Daytona Beach, Florida. According to reports, several employees at the Texas Hotel in Daytona claimed to have seen Melanie between March and June. They described a woman who not only resembled her, but had the same voice and mannerisms. One staff member even claimed the woman mentioned having a brother who played for the Cincinnati Reds. She also allegedly discussed suffering from allergies, a detail that lined up with Melanie's medical history. Bizak accepted the testimony and declared Melanie was alive and well, choosing to leave her past behind. No one from the Lexington police ever located the woman in question. No fingerprint, photograph, or physical evidence confirmed her identity. Melanie's family was outraged. How could she just walk away from her life with $12 and no purse? Bobby Flynn asked the press. She wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Years passed. Melanie's case went cold, but the silence was pierced in 1989 when investigative journalist Sally Dennen published The Bluegrass Conspiracy, a groundbreaking expose that blew the lid off Lexington's dark underworld of narcotics, corruption, and high-ranking cover-ups. At the center of the story were several former police officers, chief among them Drew Thornton, who had resigned from the force just 2 weeks before Melanie disappeared. Thornton would go on to become a notorious drug smuggler and a central figure in a massive trafficking network called the Company. In 1985, he died under bizarre circumstances after parachuting from plane with a duffel bag filled with 80 pounds of cocaine. His chute failed to open, and his body was found in a suburban Knoxville driveway. Kanan, the officer connected to Melanie, was also named in Dennen's book. He had been fired from the Lexington Police Department in 1979 amid corruption allegations and was later convicted in federal court on drug and weapons charges in 1993. An FBI informant told investigators that a woman affiliated with the company once overheard Thornton and Kanan discussing Melanie. One of them reportedly said, "They'll never find her." Melanie's parents never gave up. In the 1990s, they began speaking more publicly about their belief that their daughter had been murdered, possibly by police officers, and that a cover-up followed. They alleged that critical evidence had been suppressed and that individuals with power and influence were involved in her death. Rumors swirled that Melanie had witnessed something, perhaps a drug transaction or illegal activity involving officers. Others believed she had threatened to go to the media. Some thought she was simply viewed as a loose end. In one chilling anecdote, a retired officer testified that Drew Thornton had once joked about Melanie, saying she had been taken care of, but no one was ever charged in connection with her disappearance. There was no body, no crime scene, just suspicion, whispers, and silence. In 2019, more than 40 years after Melanie vanished, two elderly informants came forward separately and led investigators to a location known as Murphy's Landing, a remote campground along the Kentucky River. Both claimed Melanie's body had been dumped in a septic pit there. Authorities excavated the area, but found nothing. A year later, in March 2020, both Bill Kanan and Henry Vance, another figure tied to the Lexington drug scene, died within days of each other. If they knew the truth, they took it to their graves. Nearly 5 decades later, the disappearance of Melanie Flynn remains unsolved. Her case is one of Lexington's darkest and most disturbing cold cases. There's no official cause of death, no charges filed, and no trace of her body. But for many, the evidence is clear. Melanie didn't run away. She didn't vanish by accident. She was silenced. As the decades pass, the shadows around her case only deepen. But for those who loved her and those who still demand justice, one hope remains: that someone, somewhere, still holds the final piece of the truth. In the fall of 2010, 18-year-old Andrew Compton was living what appeared to be a promising and hopeful life. A culinary arts student enrolled at Sullivan University in Louisville, Kentucky, Andrew had recently moved from his home in Carmel, Indiana, and was residing in the university's Gardner Point residence hall. He was shy, studious, and reserved, someone who preferred digital communication over face-to-face interaction. But he was pursuing his dreams and building a life of independence. Then, on October 28, 2010, Andrew vanished without a trace. It was a quiet Thursday when he was last seen. He had been communicating with someone he met online and had made plans to meet in person later that night. At around 9 p.m., Andrew reportedly left campus to go to the Lucia Avenue area near Bardstown Road in Louisville, a neighborhood filled with historic homes, tree-lined streets, and quiet residential blocks. He didn't pack a bag. He didn't take any of his college textbooks or clothing. Everything in his dorm room remained untouched. The only items missing were his wallet, his cell phone, and his MP3 player. For Andrew's parents back in Indiana, alarm bells started ringing almost immediately. He was incredibly close to his family and rarely went more than a day without contacting them. His sudden silence was uncharacteristic and frightening. As the hours turned into days, Andrew's phone remained off, and his bank account showed no activity. His loved ones quickly reported him missing, and law enforcement launched a full investigation into the case. Through a digital trail, police discovered that Andrew had met 40-year-old Gregory M. O'Brien online, and that O'Brien was the person Andrew was meeting on the night he disappeared. When detectives questioned O'Brien, he initially claimed that Andrew had come over to his apartment. The two had shared drinks, had a consensual intimate encounter, and then Andrew left on foot sometime afterward. O'Brien said he never saw Andrew again, but investigators weren't satisfied with that answer. They obtained a search warrant for O'Brien's residence, and what they uncovered drastically changed the trajectory of the case. Inside O'Brien's home, police found evidence that contradicted his story. Traces of blood were discovered in multiple areas of the apartment, and under mounting pressure, O'Brien changed his account of that night. According to his revised statement, Andrew had died during their encounter, an accident, he claimed. O'Brien said they were both under the influence of alcohol and other substances at the time, and he speculated that Andrew may have broken his neck. But instead of calling for help or reporting the incident to authorities, O'Brien admitted to a series of disturbing and horrifying actions in the aftermath. He told investigators that, following Andrew's passing, he placed Andrew's body into a cardboard television box and disposed of it in a commercial dumpster. Even more chilling, he admitted to continuing to interact with Andrew's body over the next 2 days. He also admitted to destroying Andrew's cell phone and shredding his credit cards, actions he said were taken to eliminate any trace of the young man's presence. Based on O'Brien's confession and the forensic evidence gathered from his apartment, he was arrested in November 2010, less than 2 weeks after Andrew went missing, and charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the question still lingered. Where was Andrew? Authorities believe the dumpster O'Brien used was emptied into a landfill in southern Indiana. Unfortunately, due to the nature of large-scale waste disposal and the passage of time, officials determined that Andrew's remains were unrecoverable. No full-scale excavation was conducted, and his body has never been found. In 2013, Gregory O'Brien accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He pleaded guilty to evidence tampering and abuse of a corpse and entered a no-contest plea to the murder charge. In exchange, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Under Kentucky law, he may be eligible for parole after serving roughly half of that time, around 12 and a half years. For Andrew's family, the heartbreak of losing a child has only been compounded by the lack of closure. Without a body to bury or physical remains to lay to rest, they've been forced to live with unanswered questions and unimaginable grief. Despite the confession and conviction, Andrew's case continues to haunt those who knew and loved him. Andrew Compton was just 18 years old. He was soft-spoken, thoughtful, and passionate about culinary arts. His disappearance and tragic end serve as a solemn reminder of the dangers that can lurk behind a computer screen and the importance of staying vigilant in the digital age. To this day, his name remains etched into the memories of those who knew him and in the long shadow cast by one of Louisville's most disturbing missing person cases. October 27, 2002, began like any other quiet Sunday in Lexington, Kentucky. The air had a slight chill, the kind that hinted at winter creeping in. But for 41-year-old Joyce Krider, the day was meant to be a turning point, a chance at closure, maybe even a new beginning. She told her roommate that evening she was heading to visit her estranged husband, Bill Krider Jr., at the Holiday Inn on Athens-Boonesboro Road. It was supposed to be a brief meeting, perhaps one last conversation to tie off loose ends before a contentious chapter in her life officially closed. Joyce never came back. By all appearances, Joyce Krider was a woman trying to reclaim control of her life. She was enrolled in a medical transcription course, a fresh step toward financial independence. Despite the chaos of recent events, a house explosion, lawsuits, a difficult divorce, those who knew her said she remained resilient, even hopeful. But within hours of leaving that Sunday night, she would vanish without a trace. Her sudden disappearance would unravel a deeply tangled story of personal trauma, bitter relationships, and chilling suspicion, a case that remains unsolved more than 2 decades later. Joyce's life in 2002 had already been turned upside down well before her final known sighting. Earlier that year, her home had been destroyed in a sudden and devastating gas explosion. Everything she owned was lost. Insurance claims were filed. Her husband's truck mysteriously caught fire around the same time. One of her dogs died without warning. Legal troubles mounted. Joyce and Bill were both embroiled in lawsuits, some against each other, others related to insurance. The couple's marriage had long been crumbling. Their relationship was marred by volatility, financial stress, and mistrust. Though Joyce had been married before, briefly in 1998, her marriage to Bill was far more entangled emotionally, legally, and financially. Their divorce proceedings had grown increasingly ugly, with accusations of misconduct and court orders forbidding either party from contacting the other. Yet on the night Joyce vanished, she told someone she was going to meet Bill, potentially violating the court order. The timing raised eyebrows. Joyce was due to give a deposition the very next day in the divorce case. Her attorney later said she planned to reveal information implicating Bill in insurance fraud. That deposition never happened. When Joyce didn't return home, concern escalated quickly. She hadn't taken her beloved dogs with her, a red flag to those who knew how deeply she loved them. Even her knee brace, something she wore often due to past injuries, was left behind. Her bank accounts and cell phone usage came to a sudden halt that night. Perhaps most troubling was the disappearance of her car, a dark green 1993 Infiniti G20 with Kentucky license plate 035 DKD. It too vanished. 6 weeks later, in December 2002, the vehicle was found. It had been abandoned in a parking lot on Winchester Road, covered in snow. There were subtle but telling signs that someone other than Joyce had driven it there. Police never disclosed all the details, but they indicated the car's condition and where it had been parked didn't match Joyce's habits. She hadn't been seen in the area. It was as if someone had driven it there and simply walked away, confident it would be overlooked. Investigators processed the car and questioned those who had interacted with Joyce in her final days. One person quickly rose to the top of their list of persons of interest. Bill Krider Jr. At first, Bill denied seeing Joyce the night she disappeared. But later, under scrutiny, he changed his story and admitted that she had in fact visited him that night at the Holiday Inn. He claimed it was a short visit and that she left in good spirits. To many, it didn't add up. Despite the no-contact court order, he admitted to seeing her. He was the last known person to see Joyce alive, yet could offer no helpful information about her whereabouts. Bill became a central figure in the investigation, though he was never formally charged. Police executed search warrants on his property more than once, hoping to find evidence, perhaps even Joyce's remains. Nothing was found. Still, the suspicion lingered. Bill insisted he was innocent. In a bizarre twist, he later claimed he had proof that Joyce was still alive. He never revealed what that proof was. His statements oscillated between aloof denial and cryptic deflection. Friends and family of Joyce were left in a purgatory of unanswered questions. Over the years, police continued to revisit the case, hoping time might loosen lips or unearth new leads. But the trail grew colder with each passing year. In 2009, 7 years after she vanished, Joyce was legally declared dead. Joyce Krider's past was not without its struggles, but her loved ones consistently pushed back against the idea that she would simply walk away from her life. They described her as tough, often shaken but never defeated. She was optimistic about starting over. Her attorney described her as upbeat in their final meeting. Joyce had even picked out furniture catalogs for a new place, dreaming of life post-divorce. The loss of her home, her dogs, and her marriage weighed heavily on her. There was no denying that. At one point, Bill claimed Joyce had been suicidal. It's true, she sought medical help and was prescribed antidepressants. But many who knew her said the claim felt exaggerated, perhaps even convenient. They argued that Joyce had reason to live, not disappear, and certainly not to leave behind her pets, her new career plans, and a chance to start fresh after years of turmoil. In February 2013, Bill Krider Jr. died in a car accident. The news, to some, felt like a cruel twist. If he had any knowledge of what happened to Joyce, that knowledge died with him. The man who may have held the key to unlocking the case was gone, and no other leads have emerged strong enough to take anyone else to court. With no body, no clear evidence, and no confession, the case remains stuck in a shadowy limbo between missing person and suspected homicide. To this day, Joyce's disappearance haunts Lexington. Her name still appears on missing person databases. Her family, what remains of it, still wonders. Somewhere between the Holiday Inn and the snow-covered Infiniti abandoned on Winchester Road, a woman vanished from her own life. It was a cold Saturday night on December 17, 2005, when 44-year-old Vicky Delarier left her job at the Save-A-Lot grocery store in Radcliffe, Kentucky. She had just finished her shift as an office manager at 8:30 p.m. and was expected to make a routine bank deposit with nearly $2,500 in store funds, cash and checks she carried in her purse. She never made it to the bank. She never made it home. Vicky vanished into the darkness, and to this day, nearly 2 decades later, her fate remains a haunting mystery. Vicky was well known among coworkers, friends, and family for her strong work ethic, no-nonsense attitude, and fierce dedication to her teenage son. But beneath the surface, she had been quietly struggling. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, she had taken steps to protect herself and her son from a volatile home life. Her live-in boyfriend, whose name was never released to the public, had allegedly become increasingly threatening and violent. On December 5th, just 12 days before she vanished, Vicky had filed for an order of protection after he reportedly told her he would shoot her in the head. She had a court hearing scheduled for December 18th, the day after she disappeared, to discuss the order. It was meant to be a turning point, a fresh start, possibly even the day she could begin rebuilding a safer life for herself and her son. But she never made it to that courtroom. The first sign that something was wrong came on the morning of December 18th. Vicky's red Honda Civic was discovered abandoned on Highway 313 near South Boundary Road. The location puzzled investigators and family members alike. Vicky had no known reason to be driving on that stretch of road. It wasn't part of her regular route, and it led away from where she would have gone to make the deposit or return home. The scene around the car was strange and unsettling. The vehicle was parked at an awkward angle, as if it had been hastily pulled over. The hazard lights were still blinking, the gas tank was full, and the doors were unlocked. Inside the car, police found her makeup bag and purse, items she was known never to leave behind. Her keys were not found, and neither were her 2 cell phones. For a woman who had lived through a traumatic and abusive relationship, the sudden, eerie abandonment of her car on a little-used road was immediately concerning. Her family insisted this was completely out of character. Vicky was cautious, responsible, and especially mindful when it came to her personal safety. If she had planned to disappear on her own, they said she wouldn't have left behind her money, makeup, or phone. And she certainly wouldn't have left her son. Investigators quickly began piecing together a timeline. Vicky was last seen by coworkers around 8:30 p.m. when she left the Save-A-Lot store. Her next stop should have been a nearby bank to deposit the store funds. But she never arrived. There were no confirmed sightings of her after that. No security footage showing her vehicle on the expected route. It was as if she had vanished without a trace between work and wherever her car ended up. Suspicion naturally turned to the men in her life. Her live-in boyfriend, from whom she was seeking protection, became a person of interest early in the investigation. However, authorities stated that he cooperated with police, passed a polygraph test, and had an alibi for the time of her disappearance. Despite the threatening behavior Vicky had documented in her order of protection filing, law enforcement ultimately stated they did not consider him a suspect. Her estranged husband was also investigated and eventually ruled out. Even her 17-year-old son, the person she was closest to, underwent a polygraph exam and was cleared of suspicion. That left the case with few leads and more questions than answers. One of the most significant aspects of the mystery was the missing money. The $2,500 in cash and checks from the grocery store deposit was never found. Due to this, a warrant was eventually issued for Vicky's arrest in relation to the missing funds, standard procedure when money is unaccounted for in such situations. But her family and friends never believed for a moment that she had taken the money and fled. To them, the notion that Vicky, who had been preparing to move to escape an abusive partner and who had made plans with her son for the future, would abandon her life, her job, her son, and her identity, all for a few $1,000s, made no sense. Her son later revealed that they had been planning to move together. likely in an effort to start over somewhere safe, away from the threats and fear that had come to define their daily lives. He told investigators that Vicky had been worried, but determined to create a better life for both of them. Vicky's phones were never located, and every call made to her numbers after her disappearance went straight to voicemail, suggesting they were either turned off or destroyed. Her bank accounts showed no activity, no signs of travel, no purchases, no attempt to contact anyone. It was as if the moment she left work, she had been swallowed up by the night. Rumors swirled in the small communities of Radcliffe and Vine Grove. Some believed she had been abducted and killed. Others suspected she might have fled to escape the fear and danger she felt in her personal life. But if that were true, where had she gone? And why leave her son behind? As weeks turned into months and months into years, the leads dried up. The location where her car had been abandoned remained one of the most confounding elements of the case. If Vicky had pulled over voluntarily, why leave the hazard lights blinking? Why leave the doors unlocked? If she had been forced off the road, why hadn't someone seen or heard something? The isolation of Highway 313 worked both for and against the investigation. It was quiet, dark, and lightly traveled, making it a plausible spot for someone to intercept her unnoticed. But it also meant there were no witnesses, no surveillance cameras, and no clues left behind. In 2006, the FBI was consulted in the investigation, and the case was expanded to include multiple jurisdictions, but little progress was made. Over the years, authorities revisited the case several times, but each time came up empty. By all accounts, Vicky Delarier had been trying to take her life back, trying to protect herself and her son from escalating violence and fear. She had taken legal steps, made practical plans, and was actively seeking a safer future. She had no history of mental illness, no suggestion of instability, and no motive to simply vanish. Her disappearance was not that of someone running away. It was the disappearance of someone likely interrupted. To this day, Vicky Delarier's case remains open and unsolved. There have been no confirmed sightings, no remains, no known suspects, no confession, just silence, confusion, and a family still haunted by the unknown. Radcliffe and Vine Grove police continue to list her as a missing person, and foul play is suspected. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Vicky Delarier, please contact the Radcliffe Police Department or the Vine Grove Police Department.